Man, all right. I'll be the first to admit I definitely have a problem with dropping this podcast like a bad habit and then avoiding it. And now look, here we go again, as if nothing even happened. New year, new me, new background, as we can clearly see. We're gonna explain that in a little bit, but let's rock it. On the Line Rugby Podcast, episode 52. Let's go.
I need all the wins, yeah. Ain't no L's, I gotta get a no call and quits, yeah. Gotta keep on moving no matter how hard.
Here comes Danny Tusizawa, back to Baker, Baker with the fin. Kurt Baker in for DC, and this may well do it old glory with the try. The New Zealand Sevens legend, Kurt Baker with the cherry on top.
Can you believe it?
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the On the Line Rugby Podcast, a show brought to you by the Believe Sports Network. I'm your host, Micah Nagaishi, and welcome back. As I said in the cold open again, see, different setting, a little bit more comfy. This is going to be a work in progress, okay? We're currently working on, moving to a new place, getting a new studio set up somehow, some way in my studio apartment. We're going to figure it out, but this is going to be how it is going to be for the time being, at least until, maybe mid to late April. So most Super Rugby season, most of, the Premiership and URC Champions Cup Series. We're going to be sitting like this. Nice little couch, semi-fancy house that's definitely out of my pay grade. Just getting comfy, talking footy, enjoying the time that we have together. So let's break it down. For all those who are used to me just dropping this like a bad habit and leaving, welcome back. To all our new viewers who've never heard of me, I guess welcome, I'm not really used to talking to new people, so we're going to keep that habit and just kind of roll with this. In terms of things that I missed a lot of headlines that I arguably should have covered since October, including, JOC to the Crusaders. You got Tom Robinson, the Big Red, retiring from the Blues. You got a lot of MLR teams, which is a whole nother issue that we're going to talk about, and I will probably have to get that out of the way quicker rather than not. Just leaving the MLR. Not surprising, but, it should be expected by now that a little bit of organizational chaos has come through in that league over and over again. All right, hell, we're just going to break it down why I refuse, at least for now, to cover the MLR for the foreseeable future. And I think it starts with two things. I think it starts with conflict of interest, which we will break down later, and also my relationship with the MLR. So, going through the rugby scene when I first got into it during college, got into academy teams, got into, select sides, etc. Wanted to eventually hopefully represent the country. Didn't work out. Stick to my major of doing broadcasting, and eventually, got a chance to represent world rugby as a whole, and the U.S. especially, and the North American competition regarding Super Rugby Pacific and the MLR together. And, it was a dream come true. And just recently lost my job with the Pac-12 Network. For those of you who don't know me personally, yeah, that was a whole saga in and of itself. But, it was a breath of fresh air and an ability to grow the game. And, there was a lot of organizational changes at the time. World Rugby was stepping away from the MLR regarding co-management, and we were like the bridge guys to kind of almost aid in the transition, but also helping, the MLR get their feet on the ground and really get this going. So I had worked for Rugby Pass, which I'm sure everyone knows who are Union, and I'm maybe league fans. I'm not sure if they have a league site yet, but at least for Union, biggest journalism site on the world planet. They own every media outlet, every podcast you can think of. Kind of a conglomerate, kind of a monopoly, I understand, but I would still say a lot of their articles have really good impartial coverage. So I respect them greatly. And, I know a lot of guys who work there that I've idolized, at least in the writing game and also in the broadcasting game. So sorry, I'm having a whole lot of hiccups lately. But anyway, as I was saying, it's just breaking down a lot of the things that I really liked. And, organizationally wise, I had a great boss, great coworkers, that kind of thing. And, eventually they had given me essentially the free leash to editorially write about whatever I wanted, as well as work on as many videos as I could, whether it's social media, breakdown videos, website, you named it, I probably touched it. And, our team did a great job getting it done. We were recognized for, I forget what exactly the award was, but it was the #1 social media brand for Olympic sports, and rugby was one of them. And I was very proud to have assisted in that title. But unfortunately, there was a lot of organizational turnover regarding how we did our job, what we wrote about, the things we wrote about. One of them being the streaming debacle, which I'm sure, as you all know, for those of our domestic viewers in the States where I'm from, it's a show of hell. You know, you got Flow, giant ripoff. You got TRN, kind of a ripoff, but for the budget and the broadcasting quality, I would think that you deserve more from a free place, especially with the amount of time that they've had to put into it. And then you have, you know, your Peacocks, your NZR Plus, your Rugby Pass TVs, etc. And you know, really, this whole saga has been for anyone, you know, whether it's Disney or sports, a whole debacle on how, you know, you're going to manage it, who's going to be in charge, you know, what content's going up at what time, etc. So at the time, World Rugby had put out a an option, I guess you could call it, for all leagues to jump into this thing called at the time it was a World Rugby TV. So it's supposed to be all the leagues, you know, unions from northern, southern hemisphere, east, west, you name it, coming together to not only post their games, their content, but also, you know, small miniseries stuff like breakdown shows, news shows, you know, talk shows, you know, you name it, they would probably do it. Embedded content too. You know, we were really good at that, at least with the MLR, and they kind of piggybacked on that now this year with the San Diego Legion documentary, which I'm gonna break my thoughts on it right now. It's honestly a sham. You know, when you look at it in terms of American rugby, you know, it takes a diehard fan or friends of players like me or whoever, or actual players themselves, to want to watch the MLR, to have dreams of playing in the MLR. Most guys, to be totally honest, don't have dreams about playing in the MLR. You know, you see the treatment that players are getting, you see the way the league is managed, and you know, you don't want to hit it. So what do? They look at the world, and you know, for us on the West Coast, whether it's Super Rugby, us, you know, our, I guess, teammates, partners on the East Coast, you know, maybe you want to go to Europe, maybe you want to go to the Premiership, maybe URC, who knows? There's tons of options out there, but as a fan, you know, you really shouldn't be, I guess, having to pay if you want to grow your team in a very young league in which you're fighting for what, the fourth or fifth most popular spot in America. I mean, currently, I guess you'd be fighting with, let's see, top three, obviously, baseball, football, basketball. You could argue for the MLS. So you're fighting for that fourth or fifth spot. And, you know, the MLS is making huge inroads into making a lot of their content free. And I think, you know, with that investment, you're obviously going to get more eyes on it because it's free. More people will come because of that, and therefore you'll get the money back eventually. You know, you'll be a loss leader in that case for all of our business majors out there. For the San Diego Legion to put out what one would consider, as someone who paid for it and watched it, an interesting documentary nonetheless for your American fan base. I don't think a foreign fan base would really dig into that as much as I did, but a decently produced docu-series, mini-series is one we'll call it. You make it paid, and that's not going to drive in more than the diehard fan. I can tell you this, if I wasn't, you know, semi-interested in getting paid to do this, you know, I wouldn't have watched it myself, let alone invested the money. When I first looked at it and I saw that price tag, I was like, ew. You know, I think regardless of whether or not you're broke, you know, you have a lot of money or not, I don't think you want to spend that kind of money to watch that kind of content. I think you need to be at the level of, you know, maybe, I guess if you want to be on like the top 3 or 4, you know, the MLS has some paid content that's really good. The NBA, the MLB, NFL, you know, they got Hard Knocks, you name it. They have really good shows and really good content that's paid. Or, you know, if it's free, you know, they have a lot of good ads. So, and they managed to segue it really well. That doesn't have it. So personally, I think regardless, and if you're a big fan of the MLR, it's not worth the watch. And that was things that we had discussed. It was a lot of things. Despite working for them, I tried to be a little bit impartial. You know, we wrote a lot about the benefits and streaming tiered rights and how much revenue sharing could be done. As someone who's worked in broadcasting for the last 10 years, in and out, I have done, you know, tons of things, whether it's finances, revenue sharing, the whole nine, and you stood to benefit a lot more from putting your stuff out there on a worldwide platform, and really for free or for very, very cheap, than you would anything else. And because of that, you know, the broadcasting rights would be shared with everybody based off of how popular you were, etc. So you stood to gain a lot. And instead, the MLR decided to go its separate ways, and our contracts were cut, and we were laid off. So being that as it may, I already have a sour taste in my mouth. Second off, you know, ever since I've been watching the MLR, it's been kind of a chore for me to watch it. Like, I'll go to games live if there's a good game, if it's in the area, but just, the quality of arrangements, whether it's Legion at Torero Stadium. At the time last year, they were playing a Snapdragon. I got invited to the championship game. Beautiful, stadium. Felt a little awkward that most of the seats were empty, so I think there's that. Two, is just the quality of service. Outside of really like the Legion, I've been to a Seawolves game. It's different. You're not getting the same amount of fanfare, panache, fan service, merchandise incentives to come to the game. On top of that, you have the LAFC thing, which is a whole thing in and of itself. I'm sure you guys know that, or at least, anybody with an elementary school brain would know that the logo looks a little questionable. I think their marketing team could have done a little bit better with that. And I know the marketing team, and I don't know what they were thinking with that. But, just the way they treated their players without them from Atlanta or from LA, they're heavily marked up tickets for home games, despite the fact that they're getting these stadiums for basically free, at Long Beach and Annenberg Stadium at UCLA. It's sad. And, these are things that I fought for in writing, whether it was for the players union or for equal revenue sharing or tiered rights for each team so that no guys are paying for free. And, the league pushed back on it. And that was one of the reasons why we all got cut. So being that as a main, I have a very sour taste in my mouth for the MLR. On top of that, quality of play. I think, and I'm sure you could say it just because of the league, but, just quality of play standpoint, the MLR is not where I think it should be regarding, players developing into stars, watching guys that I watch in the MLR turn into USA Eagles. I've saw a few, but, there's a bunch of guys that are snubbed from that team. I think the one easy thing is the amount of power diversity and lack of parity in between teams. If you're not on Houston, you're not on Seattle, you're not on LA, or not LA, San Diego, and you're not on New England or Old Glory, you're basically not going to compete for that championship. So, you had your sleepers like NOLA, which I've said most of last year was going to do something great. And, they did. They went very far. Dallas, I said they were going to do very well. I thought next year. I didn't even think this year. They made it very far. But when you look at that point and power diversity in terms of star talent, ability to pay for them, great venue choices, etc., you're not going to see a lot of divvy between those top 4 or 5 spots. So because of that, I don't think it's a very fair competition, which breeds a lot of close games, a lot of great play, great scheming. And it's sad. I wish our domestic league would pay more attention into that, especially with the fact that the USA Eagles, since, I've been watching rugby, have been significantly on a downturn since 2019. And we're not even going to talk about that. But I think, to me, we'll break it down, Sparknos. They're essentially a tier 3 team, maybe tier 2, mid-tier, tier 2, high tier 3. They're getting smacked by most small teams from like England, Chile. You got Uruguay. It's not fun. When you look at their Pacific Nations Cup, they did really well this year. Very proud of them for that. But overall, not looking so good. So I basically don't want to sully the content that I've already put out because of my biases. And on top of that, I may or may not get my old job back with the MLR because organization of things have changed and the people that liked me there want me back. So on top of that, it would be a conflict of interest for me to cover the team, the league that I basically cuts my checks. So barring that, at least for the time being, it just will not happen. Heads up to anyone. I hope you enjoy my coverage for other teams, but as of right now, yeah, it's just not going to happen. Okay, but anyways, enough of that sad junk. Let's get into the news, at least for the offseason first. This is going to be a very long episode. Yeah, JOC to the Staters. I really thought that JOC was going to be a Red for life. They didn't really use him a lot over the last 2 years that they've had him. Whether or not it's because of Tom Lina, trying to force his way back into the starting lineup or just develop him, turn him into a Wallaby. JOC is still a dude. There's things that we watched basically for the last, 10, 15 years that he's been in, that he can still do. He's a great game manager. He's attacking amazingly right now. Just on top of that, really great leader. And, he rallies the Reds to a lot of big victories. So when you're looking at a team like the Crusaders who are lacking that leadership, lacking that organization, and overall just, not exactly managed well by that coaching staff led by Rob Penny, who I thought didn't deserve the job in the first place, but, so be it. He brings a lot to the table regarding that. And on top of that, he can mentor the Noah Hothams of the world, the let's see who else, the David Havilis of the world, who have while being All Black stardom, have not done what I think is their ceiling in terms of what their play can be. So looking back on it, JOC can bring that to the table. He also is a great dummy. If you don't want to use him for attack, hell, use him for kick tennis and throwing great passes. You have him as a great dummy to basically take away 2 to 3 defenders because he's a great run after contact kind of guy. He's going to take 3, maybe 2. So, he'll have spaces all over the park for him to throw the ball to. Great advantage. Overall, I would say that as a avid watcher of his, since I've started watching rugby, whether it's his highlights to him coming back to the Reds, it's been a great watch, and I wish he stayed in Australia. I really thought he would have went to the Waratahs again, but just to join that whole conglomerate of Wallaby side players, but so be it. I really hope he does well. He's done well actually through the last round of Super Rugby. I'm really excited for him this weekend, but it just leaves a lot on the table for a lot of the teams. Like for example, the Reds, you're gonna have to win big with Tom Lina, and I don't think they can do that. I think the best 3, in Australia right now would be 1, Ben Donaldson, 2, Tane Edmond, who arguably should be number 1. And, he's improved big time. If you watch the Bunnies NPC, him and North Harbour has been an absolute menace when it comes to not only running with the ball, passing the ball, and as well as kicking. Great job. Defense, he's improved a lot. Physicality and tackles, I love to see it from a 10 or just any back in general. And on top of that, he loves to get into the rucks, which I love as a forward. So looking at it, there gives a lot of options for him to cement his spot right there. Well, you could also argue JOC should be in there. I would say he's still number 3 right now in Australia. I don't see anybody else taking that spot anytime soon. Maybe you could argue Hamish Stewart could be a 10 for Australia. I don't think so. I think he belongs in the centers, and I'm still waiting for him to really get serious cap time in that gold jersey, but maybe he'll get it for the Lions series. We'll see. Worston Force is doing great for Australia right now. In terms of the other news, you got Big Red, Tom Robinson retiring from the Blues. Really sad for that. One of my favorite players from the Blues. Watching his physicality, his ability to not only lift his other teammates up being a captain, but also to be a leader at lineouts, be a leader in turnovers. He ran like a dang giraffe, but he hit like a bus. You had tons of players fearing him at the breakdown. When he came into Jackal, you knew he was probably going to get it. I wouldn't say he's on the level of Lachlan Boshier or a Sam Kane at the breakdown or even Dalton Papali'i, but he had a kind of threat. And, he had a great set of grubs and kicks over the last 4 years that I watched him play for the Blues, and it's sad to watch him go based off of injury. It's not expected, and, you wish him the best, but obviously, same like Carl Tunukuafe, you wish you watched him play longer. In terms of the MLR news for this, since this is the final bit, I guess I'll just break it down for you. Watching Dallas bump themselves out of the playoffs, I thought it was really sad. One could argue there is a conspiracy against all the rising top teams, and Dallas being one of them would have been hit the hardest given the fact that they had ratings for being the underdog team for so long. They have pushed hard for that moniker, and they've done very well for themselves, and I wish they would have played. Sam Galla looked like a freak there. The rest of that team was a menace, and, watching them basically hemorrhage their talent throughout the rest of the league, mostly to, let's see, Anthem, you got NOLA. It's sad. The Jackals were and could have had the option to be a good team. I just wish their organizational differences, and, maybe I'll have a guest on here next week or in the next few weeks to talk about that. But being that as it may, sad to watch them go, and hopefully they come back. As for NOLA, NOLA Gold have been hemorrhaging talent all offseason. That has been really sad to see. I've watched basically half of my favorite team, guys from that team, walk out the door into Old Glory, to LA, to San Diego, you name it. And that's, it's obviously sad to see, and they haven't really re-upped in that way to get that same quality of talent. They're still sticking with Ed Fido, who has been a freak for Rooney for the last 4 or 5 years. So you got him, but outside of that, your guys that they dropped out of that back line, you're relying a lot on these young cats, and it's asking a lot of them. So hopefully that comes out of it, but I doubt any big things are going to come out of NOLA. So I think that their playoff window perhaps has come to an end. Maybe they'll get bounced off in round 1, but we'll see. I'll watch the MLR this year when I have time, and we'll just see what happens for the league. NOLA Gold is the team. I'm really hoping that my free agent fan base for Chicago Hounds will do good this year, despite losing Billy Meeks, but it is what it is. Money pays, and everything else walks out the door, as we all know. So, being that as it may, let's break into the actual news for Super. All right, everyone. Let's. I'm thinking we'll just mash up the 2 episodes into 1 week. So then let's move into Super Rugby report cards and what I expect from this year. Then what I've seen. We'll talk about what I've discussed from week 1. Obviously, it's a little too early, but making more content out of it. Why not? And what I can see from them going into this year. So let's start off with the reigning champ, the Blues. I really wish that they would continue to develop and the cultural shifts in the organization. I still saw in round 1 that they're still going a lot for that YOLO ball. They're focusing a lot more on that offload, which while good, I wish there was more moderation because now everyone's expecting it. And you saw that with the Chiefs. They were just taking and taking and taking, or trying to stop them with good tackles, holding them up in the air, creating a maul. You name it. You need to get more physical in the gold zone with that. Outside of that, what does that mean? Pounding the ball with more forward play. You have Ofa, you have Dalton, you have Anton Segner, who's been a great side third down fill-in piece for them. You're gonna get Akira Ioane in hopefully soon, back from foreign sabbatical. You got Rico Ioane, who basically moonlights as a forward with the way he plays. You have a good team, and while you don't have Hassan Satudu, you can still pound that ball. So there you go for that. You don't have to focus on too much play because of that, because you can just set up after pounding the rock with short ball from the forwards. On top of that, you have more gain for more depth in the front row. You just lost Nebalala. You're about to lose probably Ofa, who's either going to retire Blue somehow or go on financial sabbatical in Japan. As we all know, Super Rugby players don't really make that much money compared to the rest of the world. You have a hooker in Kurt Eklund, who's getting up there in age now from his young days with the Blues. You have Ricky Riccatelli, who, while still, relatively in that middle age, is for rugby players, is still not in his prime anymore. And one could argue, I think his prime with the Hurricanes in 2018 was probably his best season for them. In regards to that, they need to start looking into having more depth in that front row. And I think that starts with recruiting. I think that starts with going for Auckland, North Harbor, Hawke's Bay, Waikato. You need to start focusing on picking up and or poaching any of these players. I doubt that Tane Edmund, who played for North Harbor this year, is going to come back. So, you're not going to have a lot of guys like that for Australia coming. So focus on that homegrown talent. There's a lot of good props out there coming out young from the schoolboys. So, make a move. I'm sure you'll do just fine. And, they've added a couple centers who I think can do a good job. I think having Peyton Spencer, for all those who don't know him, he's Carlos Spencer, the King Carlos' son, who played for All Black Sevens for the last, year and a half. Did a great job. I'm sad I didn't get to watch him in LA Sevens last year, but so be it. It is what it is. Will free in a lot of opportunities to get these young, bigger backs, like, for example, AJ Lamb, who is, one could argue, could be a 13 like Riku Ioane with the amount of physicality he brings, with the kind of body size and physicality that he brings as well, to the table. I think it's easy to say that he could be in that centered conversation. You could argue if Mark Taleo wasn't so good on the wing, he could be in the centers just with how great he is on defense. It allows you so many windows to fill in these spots, which I think is much needed, given the fact that sometimes when Riku Ioane is off, he is really off. And obviously, defend the title. I am notorious for nagging on the Blues, for really not doing good and shying away from those big moments. Whether it's going for the balls to the wall move of just, banging in a couple tries versus going for kicks. Stop going for the YOLO ball, play conservative. The little things like that, or the attitude shifts especially, is one of the big things that I ham on them, and I think that they should try to avoid with Vern Cotter and try to make it in. You're not going to have Leon McDonald for the next, time being, probably ever at this point because of what you did to him. So, keep regurgitating off of that and keep evolving. And I think that the Blues are not doing that job. And I think definitely there's a lot of teams to beat that aren't named the Auckland Blues. So moving forward, you have the Wellington Hurricanes. I think the biggest thing is to clean up their choke artistry. They certainly did not do that in round 1. I can definitely say that right now. Despite not having Jordy Barrett and despite not having Ruben Love, who I think is the Chiefs' X factor. Chiefs. All right, up next we have the Wellington Hurricanes. And my first big thing was them is to clean up the choke artistry. And obviously, if anyone watched round 1 with them and the Crusaders, they did not do that at all. It was very depressing. When you're looking at how favorited the Hurricanes were going to Christchurch to win this game in a home crowd, down south. It should have been, I'm not going to say an easy dub. I had them winning realistically by 8. They lost by 8. Makes me very disappointed in that regard. And, looking at how they played, they had great game management from Harry Godfrey, who we'll discuss later, but it wasn't looking good. Outside of that, I had load up on a solid 10 outside of Brett Cameron. I think they did that amazingly. Harry Godfrey, we'll talk about it later. Let's see. Continue to develop the defense and offensive innovations to avoid film counters. I thought they did a great job at that. Looking back on it, a lot of their normal plays that I thought they did last year very well were stopped very well by the Crusaders defense, specifically by Will Jordan kind of narrowing that attack phase to, certain portions of the field where they were strongest. For example, Christian Leo Willie, Colin Grace did an exceptional job at that. Looking at their front row, great job at defense overall. Not the greatest offensive guys, George Bauer, who had a couple pounding runs, but you're looking at that. It became a solid Crusaders defense. It looked of old. I would argue even better over the last couple years, but solid. Their offense needs to have a lot of work. Defensive wise, the Hurricanes didn't do a lot that really astounded me, I guess. You really just had Duplessis Karifi carrying the show. And, guys like Peter Lockeye, you got, guys like Brady Niose, they weren't really doing that good this game. And I think it's because of the X factors. They're not having Ruben Love. You're not having a 10 who's going to take it and go. Like, Harry could do that, and he did that a couple times, but because of the lack of really support or anything like that, it just kind of led to a lot of disaster. So it just basically came to a kick tennis competition, and the Crusaders just won handily. They need to get better at broken play. And I put for that, for their improvements, they really need to work on getting the final spot in that playoffs, because they arguably deserve it the most, and it's sad to watch them choke every week. They have a lot of good athletes. I mean, I love them as a fan, but they're fun to watch team, and it sucks to watch them lose. Excuse me. After that, let's go for the Chiefs. I would definitely say fix their collapse from last season and right the ship. They didn't do a lot of good things in the playoffs. I've talked about that ad nauseum. And when it came to the final, they left a lot on the table. Game management, especially discipline, attacking and defensive form, missed tackles, open play mistakes, you name it, they probably did it. And, having that this year, they did a lot of good things versus the Blues. They contained Mark Talev very well. They let only a couple things like AJ Lamb go through for that one try. Bowden Barrett was just dicing him up with the kicks, but they managed to hold their composure and still play within the game. And what normally would be a magical backline, they ran through the forwards, which is beautiful to watch. As for the second point, it was retain solid development pathways that the Blues steal. And please get another 10 and hooker if Trask is as bad as people say condition-wise. Oh, man. That's a big topic right there. I love Caleb Trask. I watched him when the Chiefs had almost lost every game, during COVID. I really think that first 2 seasons doesn't count with Gats at the helm. When Clayton McMillan took over and Gats went back to Wales, it became a whole different team. And, a lot of people put that on Gats being on the team. We'll talk about that again later, but I don't think a lot of things were his fault. A lot of the guys were injured or on sabbatical that year. It just wasn't a good time for the Chiefs, and they got shellacked. And, Caleb Trask was one of the reasons why I would argue that they weren't doing that. Not to say he's a bad player, but to say that he didn't push them over the line. When you have a guy like Caleb Trask, I would compare him to Jeff, if you're watching this, the 49ers stink, Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy, great guy in college, a freak in the NFL his first year. But if you're looking at it, and him in Iowa State and now him at the 49ers, you're seeing the same concepts. They're not going far without star play. Same thing with the Chiefs. Without a DMAC on that team, without a Sean Stevenson, Wallace Atiti, one could argue a Brody Batalik on the front lines, Sam Kane. They're not the same team. Lachlan Boshier, once he left, basically all the turnovers, outside of a couple phenom ones, went bye-bye. I haven't seen a single guy do that at that clip in so long, and it's depressing to watch. Having a guy like Caleb Trask come in when that happened was a breath of fresh air for me. I compared him to Alex Smith. You're not going to win the game with him, but you're not going to lose the game because of him. He did great things. He was mostly a game manager, did a lot of good kicking, a lot of good attacking, but he didn't win the games. He wasn't a game breaker. So a lot of people have frowned him for that. Supposedly because of his last couple of recent injuries, he's had really bad conditioning. And so I would say get another 10 that isn't Josh Ioane. Get another hooker that isn't Brody McAllister, who is at this point for rugby years kind of ancient. You have a lot of options out there, whether it's from the Northern Hemisphere getting guys back, Japan maybe. You have the options of even Australia. There's a ton of bolters who are looking for this year after the World Cup to really just make a move in some other place. Look at Hassan Satutu, who was looking at either Fiji or England and is leaning towards England to leave. Look at Tom Wright, who's going to go back to league. Not saying that they're hookers per se, but you have big star quality at multiple positions, whether it's from either league looking to move up. And for example, look at the MLR. Sama Mololo was a freak, an absolute freak for San Diego. Ended up getting a spot in Moana Pacifica. Does a decent job there. I can't really complain. And you have options there. As much as I may have my problems with the MLR, I am not going to say that they don't produce some very good international players. And one of them is Sama Mololo. Grow up, find a second set of options, and just nut up and just do it. They really need to start, getting into the idea that DMAC, Ollie Norris, Samapeni Finau, who's looking at being a bolter. You got Sean Stevenson, who's getting up there in age, plus he's injured. Etienne Nana-Seturo, who hasn't looked the same mostly in the last 3 years that he had before. I would argue that he hasn't looked the same since 2021, but some people disagree with me on that. He's been a great, great attacker when it comes to certain moments, but he's like Travis Kelce. Great in some moments and the rest. And he's not the same quality of player. So being that as it may, it's something that I would look into. You're looking at the 5th point in my option, which is really just, open up and win. Stop making excuses that DMAC, missed a couple kicks. Win without him. I want to see a Chiefs team that looks like Ireland. That when Johnny Sixton's not there, when Jack Crowley's not there, they don't really win the same way. They don't dominate the same way. With Wallace Atiti gone, with Sam Kane gone, with Sean Stevenson gone, this is a great chance for them to do that. And in round 1, I saw a lot of good things. I think the Blues were at the point their biggest, MacGuffin, hump over the mountain to get over. I think once they go with Cruz to the rest of the year, I'm not going to say Cruz, but, go through it. The only other hard teams they face would be the Force, the Brumbies, and the Waratahs. And one could argue Fiji. So there's that. Just working on themselves and continuing to evolve is what I asked for. As for the Satyrs, please fix your discipline, especially in the red zone. Whether it was your forwards, especially your front type 5, it was terrible how much times they gave up penalties. Scott Barrett, you could name Tamaiti Williams gave up a couple last year, a couple key ones that cost them. George Bauer gave up like 1 or 2 in the whole year, but I thought they were really egregious. Looking at Fletcher Newell, big one in the 22-minute line, who would give up 2 or 3 a season, that just hasn't looked good in that regard to holding his own. It's something that they really need to fix because they're giving up unnecessary points, and it's sad to watch. Or another thing they could work on is structured pocket play. I call pocket play being like the 10 is back in the so-called pocket. He's behind the line, managing the game, whether it's kicks, passes, calling plays, you name it. They're running a lot of broken things at the line, which I think got them not a lot of things regarding, positive offensive movement, able to call plays and move through space the way they should. And I think that's where the Chiefs thrived with Richie Mwanga. That's where they thrived with David Havili back when he was the guy running the ship a couple years back. You have a ton of options to make that count, and I think that's one of them. Is just, create what the Brumbies did with Lolesio. Create structured play from the pocket and don't move them there. You don't have a 10 really outside of JOC, who you had round 1 be freakish, to do that kind of level of antics to really run at the line. And I think you should trust in your system, dial it back a little bit. I know you have high egos, but make sure it's good, and we'll see what happens after that. I would say that another thing would be actually to develop a quality 10 with Will Jordan as the backup with 15. I love Will Jordan, but I will admit, with the amount of times he's been hurt, whether it's international, domestic, in the offseason, I hate to say it, but as a coach, availability is the best opportunity. And it's going to give you the most money. If you're available for most of the year, you're going to get paid well. You're probably going to get more stats and more filmed for people to watch. You're going to get better opportunities. And while Will Jordan is a freak, certified freak, arguably at some point, I think he can be an all-time great if he keeps up this run, is not holding the Chiefs to a higher standard with him gone. That's why I wanted them to get a high-quality 10. JOC is good, but, you need a higher player who's not going to last forever. to be in that, have him mentor somebody, have him get up there, and I think that'll help out a lot. Revez Rehana could be a freak. We'll have to see. I would love to watch him play again. Revez had a good run. In a few games he played well. And I think with JOC he can do a lot of things well. And it's kind of like that, maybe not Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, but Peyton Manning and Trevor Siemian. For all of my deep cut NFL fans, especially for the Broncos, Trevor Siemian, not the greatest quarterback, but he became a Broncos legend for almost leading them to the playoffs in his first 2 years. Still probably the best quarterback they had since Peyton Manning left, which is depressing until Bo Nix showed up. But still, for all my NFL fans or people who want to research what I'm referencing, this is who Revez could be if you put him in that kind of mentorship. He's not an all-time great. He's a solid pro, good to solid backup, above average backup, and you have him mentor under GOC for the next 2 years, have him grow as a person, grow as a player, grow in his leadership, and he could take over this team. Or you could just get someone new and have them compete for the job, which I would rather have them do. Outside of that, getting 15, you have supposedly Sean Stevenson's on the trade blocket this year. To get him in the offseason would be huge. To have him and 15 with Will Jordan would be the most dominant, double pivot at 15 ever. Hell, you could even put him out wide with Sever Reese. That would be nasty. That'd be probably the best back three in all of Super Rugby. One could argue. And in fact, I won't argue. It is the best. Even better than the Blues. So, you have that. And definitely to get younger at prop. You have George Bauer, who's getting up there in age. Tamaiti Williams, one of the best or better younger props in this generation. Fletcher Newell, I think a lot of people gas him up. He has his great moments, but he also has his egregious moments, just like Ethan DeGroot. Looking back on it, I would rather have them see more talent come through the pipeline at, Taranaki, have them come out of Southlands, anything to get them up to speed with that depth. Because, say, once Tamaiti Williams goes down or George Bauer goes down, they don't have that, George Dyer or anybody from the Chiefs in that prop deadline that they have, or that's the Landers, who have a great group, young and old, in that position. That's one thing I think they really need to improve on, because once they get that, they'll be unstoppable. And obviously their goal for this year would be to go back towards the middle of the pack and go from there. I definitely see with their statement win over the Hurricanes that they can easily do that. The Hurricanes were I would argue, the toughest matchup they're going to have in week one. Outside of the week one guys who had for Super Rugby New Zealand. And they did a fine job of working through their problems and doing it very well with a relatively half chopped up roster. So very proud of them for that. Excuse me. As for the Landers, I had that they needed to focus on their actual feeding of the wings to set up the centers as complementary pieces. I think a lot of things we're going through Timothy Tavatanawai. Less things are going on the wing. Ratovaite Vuki Niktins is out for the year. I really thought he could have been the barn burner for this year. You have this new kid. I'm not going to butcher his name, so I'm not going to say it. New 14, I think, for them. Was blowing past every single Warthog defender. Make him the centerpiece. Make the centers look like a complementary piece, which is exactly what the Landers did. They did a great job of that. I hope they hold that the rest of the year. Yeah, Tavatanawai not having him well in fantasy would hurt. I know a couple guys in my leagues that do have him, but having him and the centers as a complementary piece of the backs would be insane to watch them work. That's how I think most teams should run it, versus having them run through the centers and have the backs as a complementary piece. Offenses need electricity, and the Highlanders have it in droves. And with Sam Gilbert, who can drop a slot anywhere, basically under 50 meters, can do a great job at that. They'll be a sleeper team, I would argue, to watch for that. I would definitely say their second point would have to be fix the discipline issues, especially on the offsides and red zone offenses. They had a problem for the last 2 years of really just knocking the ball on, having cheap turnovers, not running with support, getting offsides at the breakdown. It's been a problem, and, obviously you're not going to win a game with that. You need to fix it. So there's that. You want to show major development from the depth at prop and all hooks. Like I said, they have that in droves now. So they fixed that in a great way. From Otago, any place else that they managed to poach and recruit from has been amazing. Look at Papakura, who they got. A couple guys from there. I wanted to see a, decent remnants in conversation for, a quarterfinal or maybe in the upper middle of the pack. A slate game to the top 4 or 5 would be great, but, I expect nothing less than at least above average. So like a D+, C- level team. With Jamie Joseph back, I think they can do that. and they're gonna have a good team this year, bar none. I hope it doesn't look like Japan, but who knows. As for Moana Pacifica, get better with discipline and structured play. I thought they did a good job of that with versus the Western Force, even though they lost. You know, up until like the middle of the 60-minute mark, I think they had the game in their hands and they just kind of let it go. So there's that. Just keeping your foot on the gas would be huge in that case. Regarding their yellow card, not the most egregious thing in the world. You're keeping that physical place, which I like. Obviously, I think they should get another, Levi Almua or Tavatava Nawa at the center spot. They need a power player who can just bang bang at that lineup. One could argue Solomon Alaimano gives him that electricity, but he hasn't been good since his 2018, 2019 days with the Chiefs. So there's that. I wanted them to develop more players on both ends of the comp, like, tight five, out, back row, back three, and get better in the tight five. They've done that specifically very well. For them, I've seen a lot of good things from them at least for the round one, a little too early, but I can see them getting to a quarterfinal spot, this year. I think Tano Umaga has done a great job with mentoring this team and getting them ready for big moments. Outside of the loss of the Taz, which I think was an outlier, I think they'll do really well for where they are this year and in the New Zealand comp as a whole. In terms of the Taz, my goals for them were to bring back electricity to aliens and eliminate the toxicity in the locker room. They've done a great job of that. Goodbye, all the wingers who I thought were terrible for that team, or was taking plays off or trying to do YOLO balls where they shouldn't. Oh man, that was beautiful. Looking back on it, they fired their coach. Even though I like DC, he's my coach in the academies for a long time. It's sad to watch him go. My jury's still out on that coach, on Dan McKellar. They brought in a whole good bit of front office and support guys from that squad, so happy for that. They brought a lot of electricity back to that team. Watching them in Aliens do a great job of just, while it was a Big 12 for all my football fans type of game, shootout, it brings fans into the seats. And, Aliens deserves that kind of statement piece. And the Taj showed that they can keep up with a New Zealand side, which I never would have thought they could have. I thought the biggest thing that I thought they should do is to fix the pathway system and implosion of the forward pack through proper development. Man, did they do a good job of that. The pathway system has been fixed. I thought a lot of the things that the Fijians who are on the support staff did well was fixing the physicality, fixing what their offseason training was like, and getting a lot of the younger schoolboy sides and younger farm league team sides to basically come and watch. They got a couple of AFL players. They got Joseph Suali'i, who I thought did a great job, not only with high ball, which is typical league stuff, running with ball in hand, typical league stuff, but also physicality, which also typical league stuff. But he did it very well to make it Union-esque. He can still compete at the breakdowns. He's not passive. He took a lot of big shots. Still survived. That's the kind of culture I want from our Taz team. I want them to be that physical, pound you in the mouth team with a good backline. Jorgo is back. He's going to be a fiery set. Oh, man, this team can be so many things if Dan McKellar can put it all together. And then, obviously, give Angus Bell and Ted Edmonds some quality help for the love of God. I still remember when I put this a couple months ago, and I still hold it to this day. Angus Bell had no damn help. Tani Alatupo was good in a couple segments. He lasted a long point of the game, but he needs help. Angus Bell should not be the forward set piece tight five man running amok out there doing what he did. And he still did good, despite the fact that his stat sheet was relatively meh. Longy Houston, okay, I guess. Charlie Gamble, probably the best forward they have. They need a better back row, desperately, I think. Their backs are obviously elite. I would love to see them keep working at that. And as for their goals for this year, I think it should be to go back to the quarterfinal or semi. I think they can make it to a semi and look physically imposing doing it, win or lose. That's huge for them. You have to, as a world hot team that's coming off a lot of toxicity, make a statement. And this year, they have the opportunity to do that with a pounding force. And if they do it right, I think they're cemented for the next, 3 to 5 years. If not, I don't know. We'll see. As for the Reds, I want them to regain their lost physicality within the pack. I'm still waiting on that because round one didn't happen, so we'll see. I thought, Salakai Aloto getting him back from the Rebels would do a good deal of that. Losing Tani Alatupo would suck. I need to see Harry Wilson come back into form from when he was during COVID and after that. I definitely want to see them develop more centers to fix their injury woes. You're gonna lose Hunter Paisami, who's gonna probably go to the NFL this year. You lost Jordan Pataya, who is also looking at going to the NFL this year or going back to the league. You have Josh Fluke, who is basically an offensive guy. I wouldn't consider him a defensive magnate at the center spot. I would like to see them get a more total package or develop a more total package at that to get there. And I think Ronan O'Gara's former side can do that exceptionally well. So we'll see about that. As for the discipline, like every other team could use some work. And then remain in the quarterfinal fight and ideally not collapse like they did in the quarterfinals. Because when they did, they dropped like a rock, and it was not a good time to watch them lose the way they did. So being that as a May, I thought that was sad. As for the Force, I really wanted them to get Ben Donaldson some help, fix the back rows and the locks. Didn't really fix the back rows, but Charlie Tizano was looking like a menace out there in round one. In terms of the getting help in the back end, they did a good job at that. They signed a good deal of players, which are star power. We brought Harry Potter in, who's doing okay. I really want to see him do more. You got Ben Donaldson, who's a freak, and they loaded up, especially in the center spot, which is what I desperately wanted from them. They're doing a good job of that. I would love to see them stop relying on older free agents to win games and fans, but I understand why. It's Perth, and not a lot of guys are going to want to move to Western Australia. So being that as it may, I can see why that would go work, but I would like them to see it go younger, early to mid 20s, maybe. I'm not asking for a lot, but something. And then obviously make staying at Perth more appealing for developmental players, and that coincides with the last spot. And just like the Landers, fight for an upper to middle of the pack side. I think this year they may be one of the teams to beat, so lucky for them. All right, as for the Brumbies, I want them to see them get younger in the 4 pack. Yeah, they have Slipper and they have a whole bunch of guys from the Rebels side, which again makes me sad. But I need them to get younger, and especially, for example, back row. You lost Rob Van Lee to a hamstring tear. Charlie Kill is getting up there in age. I want to see them get younger and get more effective at handling the ball and turnovers with that, because their younger guys not really as good as that as I would like. I wanted to get more involved in the passing game, especially with the forward pack. I watched a lot of good things from the last week where they were scoring options in the red zone. I want to see them more in the open field. Their stat sheet wasn't that great. Would love to see them work on it and get better. Obviously, working forward fitness, another big thing in the Brumbies. They're great at set piece and not really in the middle of the field. I'd love to see them get more innovative on offense. You have one of the best offensive coaches in Stephen Larkham, arguably in Australia's history, who has a great staff. You have no excuse not to do this. I just don't understand why they need to keep from putting their side in a corner. They're making themselves very one-dimensional, and that's sad. They need to start working on a lot of the things that they easily can get on paper. I think for one thing, another is keep Lolesio in the pocket and allow him to retain the pill. They didn't really do a good job at that. Lolesio was kind of all over the place. He missed a couple kicks. His ball and hand skills were not that good. Like I said, he's more of a liability. I would love to see him become more of a game manager for them and just let the forwards work, let the centers work. And he's not doing that, so it's causing a lot of problems. You're going to see that, there are a lot of teams that are going to be exploiting that opportunity more than the Drua did. And that's saying a lot because the Drua is still a good team. So looking at that, they really need to get better in that regard. I would love to see them fight for the semis, but I don't think so. Man, last but not least, the Drua. Get better discipline and structured play. Didn't really do that in round one. Kind of disappointed. I love the Fijian flair, but I love a little bit of organized play too, a little bit of argy-bargy with that. They're not really doing that, so oh well. Retain players and get a splash or so in free agency periodically. They didn't make a splash in free agency. They didn't really retain players well. A lot of guys signed with Sale or Bath, Bristol. I think a couple guys signed for Montpellier and Stade Francais. So there's that. A little bit disappointed in that. They need to clean up their late game collapses. They had a chance, a very good chance, after half of holding the Brumbies to a competitive game, and they let that thing go away. Oh man, it comes with a lot of discipline, a lot of broken play that I think they let go. Things they need to fix. It's easy, relatively easy things, but the amount of athletes they have on that team, and it shouldn't be a problem. They need to ideally, expectation-wise, get to the semis or get starlet starts, from start to finish, at minimum. And just overall get better. I want to see them go deeper than a quarterfinal, but we'll see. As for this first part, I'm gonna cut this up. It's almost an hour long. I'm hoping I didn't lose a couple people with my fast speak and attention span. We're still gonna get back into the flow of things, and I'm gonna cut this thing into two. So we're gonna talk about Six Nations, all Super Rugby in the next segment. It's going to come up in a couple days. Let's see what happens. All right. Thanks, guys. See you next time. Peace.